Rockler's line of router bit setup jigs makes adjusting your bits fast and much easier. And they offer these jigs for several of the toughest profiles and router bits to set up. The profiles are precisely machined in these blocks so they match the profile of the router bits perfectly, and that makes them very, very accurate. The jigs are made from the super tough HDPE material to make them long lasting. All of the jigs are 3/4 inches thick to match the most common size wood used in woodworking. Some of the setup blocks do have one edge that's meant to be used with thinner material. Using the Rockler router bit setup jigs can't be any easier. You just lay it flat on the table surface and adjust the bit height until the block slips over the cutters. It's best to have one of the cutters pointing directly at you so you get the full profile and you get the best setup that way. This is the first time that I used this setup block, so I actually went past the perfect setup to make sure that I wasn't hitting a false spot. Then I backed it back down until it fit the profile perfectly. All of the Rockler router bit setup jigs that I tried for this review fit their profiles perfectly. When the bit has a bearing that controls the depth, we set that flush to the faces on the router fence. I always make a test cut to confirm the setup, but in every case with the Rockler router bit setup jigs, the setup was perfect the first time around. Most of the time these setup jigs are used right on the router table itself to set the bit height. But you can also use them with the sled by simply putting them on a sled and then setting the bit height. Take your time, and these setup jigs are just as accurate on a sled as they are on a table surface. Then you can use the sled to make your cut safely and get a perfectly placed cut. And here you can see that the rail and style profile fits together perfectly. It's flush, and with the little clamping pressure that line disappears. Here's the 45-degree lock miter bit that has given woodworkers fits for years. And this is where the Rockler router bit setup jig really pays for itself. Once I had set the height, I used the same setup jig to set the fence so that it just touched the back of the setup block when it was over the full profile of the bit. Here again we want one of the cutting edges pointed straight forward so you know we're over the full profile of the bit. And we cut one side of the joint with the piece of wood flat on the table. Just take your time and don't force the wood. Let the bit do its job. And then we cut the other side of the joint with the wood straight up against the fence. Here again we take our time, hold it tight against the fence, and make the nice slow cut. And here's that joint with no glue and just hand pressure, and you can see how close this fits. I might move the fence back just a tick, but not much at all. This is the locking box joint bit, and it's also been a problem for setup. This Rockler setup block has two edges, one for flat on the table and the other for setting the bit for the upright cut. And we use the setup block for setting the fence position. This cut is for the front of the drawer, and that's always cut flat on the table. For overlapping drawers, you can move the fence back and take a second cut to make a reveal on the ends. Here's what the normal locking box joint looks like. And here's the same joint, only with a deeper cut, so we have an overlapping drawer front. If you've been having a tough time setting up some of the classic router bit profiles, you need to look at the Rockler router bit setup jigs. They make these setups very easy, very accurate, and very fast.